So our next session is going to be on governance. And all the discussions we've had today have been really exciting, but how do we ensure that we hold people accountable, that we have the right leadership, the leadership at doing what is needed. We know the challenges that we face around that and the lack of having systems that match across the borders. And the person who's going to be taking us through this is a dear friend, a fellow from Kenya, Ms. Nuru Mugambi. Nuru is also the head of the Eisenhower Fellows Kenya chapter. She's a director of the Kenya Bankers Association. And I think at this particular point, especially in the sector and in Kenya, she's got a really difficult job keeping banks progressive in a space that has been dominated by disruption in the digital space. If kind of anyone wants to understand how quickly disruptive the digital and financial industry can be, or the digital industry can be to the financial sector, they should talk to Kenyan bankers. And before she started, just on the issue of digital, I just want to share a statistic. Safaricom, which is probably one of the best known local brands, quickly disrupted the financial sector with M-Pesa, which is a mobile payment platform. And initially, it was just like easy way to send money. Then it became a payment structure. Then it's got health and other ways that you can interact with it. But last year, they started a really interesting project, and they launched at the beginning of this year. It's called Fuliza. Fuliza basically means when you're making a payment, and you go to make it, and you don't have enough money, because you just don't have enough money. So a little message pops up and says, do you know you can Fuliza? And what that actually means is that you get money automatically to pay that. So it's a loan. It's like an advance. The interest rate on that is quite high, as you can imagine, overall, but people normally pay back between 2 to 3 days. Average amount being transacted right now is about 500 shillings per person. So that's roughly, $5? What is it? $5, okay? They rolled this off 4 months ago. What's a guess how much money they've transacted in 4 months? I want a guess. Financial people. And if you know about it, just don't. I think everyone else, just throw a figure out. Tell me what you think they have rolled out. Huh? Try whatever figure at this point. It's convertible. Is that it? Is it 50 million? It's about 5 billion shillings. It's about 5 billion shillings. What's that? It's 500 million. 50 million. 50, he's fair, you're right, $50 million. So they've added $50 million to their business without employing anyone. Okay? And they do have banking partners, so there's a couple of banks laughing to the bank, literally. But the point of that is, yes, all of it. But scaling something like that across a region, what could that mean to the financial sector? The default rate is negligible because it's on your phone, you use it for other things. And how do you pay back? The minute you put money, it's gone. So unless you're planning on registering multiple lines, it's not. So I think in terms of thinking and learning from each other, there's some really, really, really interesting things happening. But what's the governance around that like? And what would that mean if it needed to move to Rwanda? Or just Uganda, Tanzania, just the EAC? So governance is going to have to play a critical role. And so with that, I'd like to ask Nuru, who has managed to manage all the things, to come in and she'll introduce her panel. A round of applause for Nuru.
I'm on? Okay, Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to ask my panel, we're going to do something different. So I'm going to ask my panel to come on, and you're going to dance. I'm joking. Let's give them a round of applause. Yawa, Eddie, Grace, Musa. Aren't we coming on like the bosses that we are? So we recognize that we have quite a task. This is the last panel of the conference. We started on a very high note with His Excellency Paul Kagame, and over the past 2 days we have learned a lot of very powerful insights, a lot of very helpful information. I'm sure many of us in our respective areas have been taking notes in terms of what we can take away and literally from Monday start implementing. But we also realize that we don't want this to be a talk shop, right? We've heard about the cocktail circuit, we've heard about the UN circuit. We want to make sure that we have some actionable outcomes. So what we've decided as a panel is that we literally are going to work on a policy brief that comes out from this conversation, because we feel that it's important that we inform policy. So we commit to doing that. So who are we? So I think we'll start. I felt like the gentlemen were feeling marginalized during His Excellency's session. I saw the men kept putting up their hands, and it was just the women talking. So we're going to start with you, Musa, for diversity's sake. Just introduce yourself, your area of interest, and we're going to go around.
Hi, I'm Musa Salmanu, 2016 fellow from Nigeria. I spent the last 22 years of my life in the military, so I'm moving differently, still in the military, peace and security. Presently, I'm the senior military advisor for the Center of Civilians in Conflict. And what we do is to work with governments and militaries, especially within the Lake Chad region, on how best to protect civilians caught up in conflict areas.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yawa Hansen Kwao, and I'm the Executive Director for Emerging Public Leaders. And I have the great honor of working with the government in Liberia and in Ghana to find talented young people to work for civil service institutions. I come to this work after about a decade of running a women's leadership nonprofit, and I truly believe that leadership doesn't happen in a vacuum, and until we become really deliberate about preparing the next generation, it won't happen. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to a really dynamic discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eddie.
Thanks, Nuru. My name is Eddie Mandry, and I serve as Director for Africa at Yale University. I'm originally from Kenya, and it's an honor and privilege to be here for this program. I'm not an Eisenhower Fellow, but I've met some really wonderful fellows from across the continent and the world, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Grace Obado. I'm also from Kenya, but I've been based in Spain for the last 30 years, where I teach international relations and sustainable development at both IE University and IE Business School. And I'm really pleased to be here.
Great. Thank you all. Let's give them a round of applause. So we're going to have a very dynamic conversation around governance. We're going to share some insights, and then we're going to invite you also to share your insights, because I think it's important that we have interactive conversation. So we recognize that the democratization of African states is increasing. We're seeing a lot more of democracies happening. I think certainly tools such as social media is helping us keep our leaders accountable and helping people realize their rights for solid democracies. So the underpinning of all that is good governance, right? So when you think about what is good governance, obviously words like stamping down on corruption, like we're talking about in Kenya, things like accountability and transparency, things like the rule of law. And we have different perspectives representing here. We've got military, we've got research, we've got the Africa work that the Yale University is doing, and we've definitely got the work that Yawa is doing in terms of leadership. And I think we're going to start with Yawa. When you think about leadership, what does the future leader look like?
When I think about leadership for Africa, I think about the promise of good governance in general, which is the delivery of essential services to people. I think that we're in a moment on the continent where we're getting between election cycles, with little or no bloodshed in most countries on the continent, and that's great. We're seeing somewhat of a stomping out of the old guard, long-standing dictators or people who've ruled for multiple generations are slowly being taken off the scene. We're seeing the entrenchment of democracy in its various forms across the continent, and those are really exciting markers. And I think it's clear, at least to me, that the day of the strong man is over. That it's no longer about that strong man. And my hope when I think about the future leaders is that we will now focus on building strong institutions. And I think if I use Ghana as an example, my family left Ghana when I was quite young. My father was a politician during the military coup that ousted President Hila Liman in 1981. There were two coups, one in 79, then later in 81. And so my family has that unique experience of having been compelled to live elsewhere for several years. And I think essentially the promise of good governance is that you'll create a country where your citizens want to remain and not want to leave. Luckily, Ghana has, like Rwanda, transformed that story of tragedy to one of triumph. And today, Ghana is one of the beacons of democracy on the continent, and that's encouraging. But I still do think that the opportunity for this moment is how do we build strong state institutions? And it's my opinion that you build strong state institutions on the foundation of excellent talent. So I worry that there's a lot of attention, time, resources being invested in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and in upskilling talent for the private sector. And I'm not saying that that is incorrect, but I do think it's incomplete if it's not matched with a similar effort and fervor about investing in who is going to make the policies for the future. Who are the people who are going to write the laws, set the regulatory framework that will influence the way my children and yours will live? I don't believe we're giving enough thought to that, which is why when I was on my fellowship in 2016, I started to contemplate the question of how do we create a pipeline to government? Because for nearly a decade, I was working with women. We were upskilling them with private sector skills, and there was meaningful success there. But there was a 13-year-old girl in one of our sessions once, and we asked the question, what does empowerment mean to you? And she said, empowerment is the ability to make things happen. And that sat with me for a little while, and I began to unpack that in a meaningful way, and was at a moment in my career where I started to think very deeply about the impact of our work. And the truth is, if you're an entrepreneur, you run a business, whatever it is, the government sector really is that sector that makes things happen, that creates the environment that allows businesses to thrive, that brings innovation to scale. And if we're not deliberate and passionately devoted to getting competent and ethical change makers into governance, then we have a problem. So, my vision over the next 10 years is to work strategically with partners to build a pipeline, a new cadre of public servants that think critically, that work competently, and that will really drive change in Africa. Because the promise of this African Renaissance that we all believe in is that we will be able to deliver on the promise of good governance, which is the delivery of the social services to citizenry across the continent.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Oh yeah, sure, let's give her a round of applause. I'm wondering how many of us in the audience are thinking about, would I work for my government? Especially if you're an entrepreneur, would you trade in your business to work for government, I wonder. But at this point, I'd like to bring in Eddie here. She brings a good point about the question about are we building the capacity and training this pipeline, not only in the private sector, but also she's raising in the public sector. So do you want to share your thoughts on this area of capacity?
Absolutely.
Capacity building, yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think leadership, as you mentioned, is critical in terms of creating the frameworks, the mechanisms for delivery of services to citizens who are entitled to those services. We have, for instance, I'll use the example of Kenya, where we have a vice president who goes on record identifying himself as a hustler. Now, hustler could mean many different things, but in some spaces, that's someone who's looking for shortcuts to achieve their ends. So when we normalize that kind of nomenclature and language in our discourse, what message and signal are we sending? And that goes back to the question about the educational systems we have around the continent. If we're going to have a system of free trade across the continent, movement of people, what do national governments have to do to make sure that their citizenry are sufficiently educated and equipped to contribute to their domestic economies, but also the continental economy? The pedagogy and practice, what are we teaching in the curricula, in the schools and universities? Is it relevant? Is it appropriate? Are we also teaching some of the soft skills, the public speaking, critical thinking, problem solving, really practical things that will be necessary in the workforce of the 21st century? So there's a lot of opportunity for us to think creatively, to bring new practices into how we advance. But if the commitments are not there from government, from our communities, the demands are not being made from our communities, then we cannot really leverage the true value that exists in the continental trade area. And I think there's, just by being a signatory, we're not going to get the jobs automatically. It's all about implementation, and people have spoken about how important and critical implementation is going to be.
So capacity building and implementation will help enable better institutions that Yao is talking about. And indeed, governance happens on many levels. Of course, there's the Pan-African level. We have the state level in terms of making sure rule of law happens. You have the institutional framework, of course. But I wonder, are we leaving out an important component being the informal sector? And I know, Grace, you've done some work in terms of sustainable development and bringing in the informal sector, and you wonder, are our governance frameworks fit for that purpose of ensuring that the informal sector is taken care of?
Thank you very much. So as we are busy here talking about and celebrating, and rightfully celebrating, the African continental free trade area, 43% of trade on the continent is estimated, because we don't have real data, to be in the informal sector. And in certain countries, if you look at a country like Benin, that goes up to about 75%. In Nigeria, the biggest economy on the continent, it's about 25%. So what are we going to do? Which instruments do we have, or are we going to put in place to make sure that such a huge chunk of our business people or our population is not left behind? And so there are parts, there are already initiatives on the continent, and Kenya is a precursor in this sense. So what Kenya has been doing is that they've set up a platform to help cross-border women traders at the border between Uganda and Kenya. And this has been happening for a number of years, and the good thing is that they have also been keeping data that can be analyzed on what their trade volume was and the problems that they faced before, and what is the situation right now. So these, as many of you can imagine, so these women also faced a lot of gender-based violence and sometimes even sexual harassment, and they didn't get a good deal for their products. And so a company set up a media platform, also employing very few people, that sends them messages on their mobile phone that informs them about pricing. And if there's any change, any important market change that they need to know, they're also informed about it. And these women, if they suffer any harassment, they can also inform the private company about it. So my question when we started looking at this was with a group of my students in my classes like, but where is the government here? Where are the institutions that are set by the government to protect this kind of traders, but at the same time also to make sure that they are contributing positively to the economy, because the end result of that is that it does increase fiscus. And when we are collecting more money, we can invest more in education, healthcare, and in infrastructure. So we looked at cross-border trade between Nigeria and Benin, because the numbers, the volumes are huge. And you do have formal and informal trade happening at the same time. And most of those traders are women. And if you look at Benin, for example, these women contribute to 64% of their economy each and every year. And as I said, these are estimations because it's not recorded. That's why it's informal. And so what needs to be done? So two things come to mind here. How do we regulate to loop them in? Because if we don't, then the Continental Free Trade Agreement will not mean much to a huge part of our population. And secondly, how do we leverage technology? And this is why technology is important here. If we look at the economy of any country in the world that has made an important leap to integrate itself into the global economy, they have done that at the back of an industrial revolution. So if we look at the first industrial revolution, we were dealing with slavery. So we did not talk about steam engines because we couldn't. Next to that, the second industrial revolution, what was happening in Africa? We were dealing with colonization. So electricity was not something that, or modern sources of energy, it's not something that was a priority to us. The third industrial revolution, which happened in the late 60s, that mostly deals with introduction of computers, we were dealing with decolonization and nation building. This is the first time that I think we are free to take full charge of the fourth industrial revolution and leverage technology at all levels. But that means we need to invest in research and development. So how are we doing within that space? So in Africa, on average, we invest about 1% in research and development. The most advanced countries within that space, like Kenya, invest 1% of their GDP on research and development. With the rest of the country, sorry about that. I think the data is not precise. So in Africa, we invest 0.1%. Advanced countries in Africa, like Kenya, invest 1%. We don't, if we look at our demographics, we don't have time to waste. So these are things that we need to do with speed. And my third point regarding trade and governance is that if we look at us, and this has come up over and over again in the conversations that were here before, and the summary of it is basically that we consume what we don't produce, and we produce what we don't consume. And so if you leave the wealth at the bottom of the pyramid, the informal sector, and you move to the formal sector, what do our SMEs have to offer? What do our big companies have to offer? We can't always be consuming technology coming from outside. We are the ones who know our needs, and we need to participate in the whole of the value chain. And I think here I need to commend our private sector, because all across the continent, and our governments as well, but more our private sector, because they are doing incredible work in certain cases without getting any support from the government. So what would happen if we set up a framework that takes our needs from a policy standpoint into perspective And I will end my discussion right now referring to the Boer women in Nigeria. Does anyone know about the Boer women in Nigeria and their contribution? Sorry, Abba women in Nigeria. Okay, right.
You're thinking in Spanish?
Yeah, I was thinking in Spanish again. So this is Abba women in Nigeria. And so these were a group of women that mobilized many more women at the beginning of the 20th century without any support, without any institutional support or technology to stand up to colonization. And they were quite successful in that attempt. Yeah.
Thank you. So Musa, Grace has brought up, actually I never really thought about that during the first industrial revolution we were slaves.
Yeah.
The second one we're dealing with colonialization. The third we're now trying to catch our breath and set up our democracies. We're still trying to set up our democracies and really embed this issue of free rule. But at the same time now the robots are coming. Right. So this is now where I want to bring in Musa in terms of when you think about integration, when you think about governance structures, what would you say your recommendation or your insight would be?
Okay, Nuru, what I'll add is that in the fourth revolution, actually I think we're dealing with internal conflicts. Because I mean, as you pointed, those revolutions and what we were dealing with in Africa, unfortunately, and I'm an optimist, but then we have to look at the reality. Here we have regional conflicts, or most of the regions, you find out that you have these conflicts here and there, and they're not limited to particular countries. We take the Lake Chad region, for example. You have Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, all infested with some kind of conflict or whereby millions or hundreds of thousands of those productive population are not really engaged because of those conflicts that are going on. But then that does not mean that we cannot pick up and get things going. How I would look at it is that the African continental free trade is not completely something new. These are things of free trade, common tariffs are not new. For example, in West Africa, ECOWAS have been there since 1975, talking about the same thing about facilitating trade among countries and free movement of people and goods. Then what I think we should do is try to look at what were the gains made, what were the assumptions at the beginning of ECOWAS, and COMESA, we heard about COMESA today and other sub-regional groupings. What went wrong, or did they achieve those things that we wanted them to achieve? We saw how ECOWAS metamorphosized because of the realities on the ground, from an economic grouping to a security grouping. So what brought about all that? And we are seeing that, for example, in the Lake Chad region, one of the things that is exacerbating the conflict is the lack of infrastructure between the communities that used to trade amongst each other. We know that trade facilitates growth, it facilitates people, development and so on, and people, in fact, it facilitates cohesion. Now, when all those things are missing, what are the gaps, or those probably could be the gaps that we need to fill. Now, when it comes to the African Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Agreement, I'm thinking, shouldn't we learn from other, say, groupings like EU and so on? Do we just say that we have so number of countries in Africa, and so from the onset, everyone must be a member or automatic member? Are there benchmarks that we should set that every country should be able to attain before you become a member? So that way, so that countries, that imbalance amongst or within countries is not looked at to hamper the growth of the other country. I give you an example. Some countries are, and probably that is real, thinking that, well, if we sign into this, what does it portend for our own manufacturers, local industries? What if my neighbor becomes a dumping ground and everything that is, all the the gains that have been made over the years are eroded because just because my neighbor allows everything to come in, and therefore those manufacturers, the local manufacturers, and the entrepreneurs that we're actually trying to grow are not able to sell. They are not able to compete. We heard about that. Now, what is the implication for security? We have a population of about 70% across the continent that is around 35, between up to 35 and so on, and not very gainfully employed. What would that mean to individual countries?
Yeah, I think it brings up this issue of good governance, because indeed, as much as we're coming together and integrating and promoting trade, of course, there is going to be tension. There is going to be tension between countries that feel that they have a comparative advantage on a product versus another. And I guess that's why it's really important to have the capacity aspect. It's important to really have policies that really well articulate the informal sector to make sure that as we're industrializing, as we're taking up the technology, we're literally not leaving anyone behind. At this point, as a panel, we want to press pause and throw it to all of you. Let's all look up from our phones and really engage. So we had a question for you all as the audience. In terms of governance, there are those principles of good governance, right? So there are issues around rule of law. There's issues around stamping out corruption. There's issues around transparency and accountability. From the various countries you represent, we heard that there are over 20 countries in the room. What best practices do you think you've seen that at the Africa level we would want to pick up? Oh, awesome. People put up hands right away. Okay, fantastic. So, Madam, and then Mr. Kahura. And please say where you're from. Okay, awesome.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Payush Chaudhary. I've come from Pakistan.
Okay.
And I've attended many of the regional conferences that Eisenhower Fellowships have put together. The first one was South Asia Rising. So my input on the topic of governance would be, one of the things that we're doing in Pakistan is we're following the accountability and responsibility arc. So one of the binding factors for the state institutions that we're developing is based on trust. So the principles of trust defined how the framework is sort of developed. So maybe perhaps if anyone is interested, we'd be able to share that framework.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So Yawa, what do you think about that as you're building the capacity of public sector, this issue of trust? It's a soft skill.
It is, but I think that there are some real technical things that you can do to build trust, and I think benchmarks is one of them. And I do think when it comes to trust, I often also look at the trust of the citizenry of their governments as perhaps one of the biggest hurdles that we have to deal with on the African continent. We're the youngest continent. I think the average age, depending on whose report you're reading, the average age of the African continent is between 16 and 18. When you juxtapose that against the average age of the political leadership, the median age is around 65. So there's a continent that's super young, led by people who are super old. And that makes for an interesting relationship, to say the least. And so there is this despondency and sometimes apathy that you see within and among young Africans who do not see themselves in their leaders, who do not feel that their issues are being heard, and that itself is a security threat, as Musa was talking about before, because this creates an environment where extremism is thriving in many parts of the country, as we've seen in Nigeria, for example, with Boko Haram. So there are these multiple layers of trust issues. So it's not even just trust within governments, but it's between governments and citizenry. And I know that there are many efforts. I know the Open Government Partnership is doing a lot to work with countries and civil service organizations to kind of create an environment where there's more active citizenry. And one young person put it this way. So every 4 years, I have this voter's card I dust off and I take with me. I go to this long queue and wait for the opportunity to cast a vote for someone who says they're going to give me the moon. I don't even see a star. And I'm set in the same cycle 4 years later to go do the same thing. So I'm going to give up. I'm not even going to vote. So we're recognizing that there are so many people who aren't even participating in voting anymore, voting for local elections. Most people, how many of you in the room, for example, know who your local assembly member is or know who your member of parliament is? Do you follow that? So that's...
We are all type A people in this room, huh?
That's exactly what needs to change. And so for years, it's been the strong man or person at the top of the governance structure. That's been the most important thing. And all of our government resources and efforts seem to be devoted to kind of getting that one person elected or selected. And then, you know, we just kind of lay back for 4 years. But I think it's now time to start focusing on building the institutions. Because, for example, ministers come and go, but the chief directors and the other bureaucrats in those ministries are largely unchanged. So if we start now investing in who's leading the ministries and who are those chief directors who are making the policy decisions, if we're creating a talent pipeline of young, energetic, globally aware, socially conscious young Africans who are entering the government sector, I think this is how we hedge towards some of these trust issues that you describe.
And it's important because it's not good enough just to have the policy. People have to be able to trust that the framework is going to work. Okay, good. So, Mr. Kahura, your input?
Thank you, Nuru. My name is Charles Kahura. I'm an Eisenhower Fellow from Kenya. Now, I have a slight variation to this kind of thing, and sort of it sinks. One, I don't believe we ever had weak governance institutions. As Africans and at the colonization stage, we actually had strong governance institutions within our little small entities. And it worked out very well. President Kagame explained yesterday about the conflict and resolutions and the 70 resolutions they got and the million solutions they got within a homegrown institution. Let's recognize that we actually have our own. When we were colonized, the colonies came with education. After education, they gave us one positive thing with education. We're able to communicate within our various diversities and ethnic entities. Now again with technology, we're actually still able to do it. We didn't need that. But anyway, we got education, we were able to access this information. I believe in a concept called chopsticks interventions that work within small entities, bring them together, and build a governance institution around them, defined by them. Let's stop looking for this template that is set out by France to come and work in Rwanda, or by DC to come and work in Ghana or Kenya. We can actually grow our own towards defining our agenda, our objective of getting Africa together. So if we're going to develop a global forum for trade and interaction, we can actually do it and borrow from our own little entities. The big man approach with a 4-year cycle comes because we borrowed that template. It may not necessarily be the best. I don't expect maybe the African Union to be the lead in this. It could form the forum, but maybe we need to grow something from these 52 out of 55 entities when the 55 all get together and see how we can cross-trade within a governance model that does not have a big man approach and a cycle of this is the, yes, there has to be some leadership entity or some forum that gives that entity. But my prayer is, and I'm not giving the solution, is that we grow it from our own little entities and get it together within a framework that is objectivated towards achieving that goal. Otherwise, all our efforts towards governance based on template will face all these restrictions, face all these trust issues. We never had trust issues. We have how many tribes in Kenya? 70?
Many.
75. We traded together. We had no forum of governance. In fact, in closing, I've always said government is an unnecessary overhead.
Wow. All right. So, but I think Charles brings in a very important point. And you know, the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun, isn't it? And when you think about this issue about rule of law, automatically we go to what? What do you think? the court system, right? Yeah. But that's not the only system through which justice is realized. Indeed, I think in every African society there's a tree somewhere that we all would assemble and the elder would walk us through dispute resolution. The same as in the Native American context, the elders would never take a position without factoring how it affects 7 generations down. That is governance. They didn't call it governance, but that is governance. So indeed, we don't need to create something new because really inherently we have some of these systems. But you're the researcher. Oh, you want to touch on that? Yeah. So maybe you can touch on that and then we'll get Eddie to chime in.
Okay, just to add on to that, if you look at how governance was structured in Botswana pre-colonial time, they had a forum called Gotla. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it well. Yeah. So they had this forum where they would meet on almost a weekly basis, and the leader was restricted and limited in terms of his power. So the leadership was mostly assumed by men. And it was quite inclusive, and to a large extent, even more inclusive than the Greek classical democracy that we so much talk about. So why wasn't that very affected by colonization? Because Botswana was never colonized. Botswana was a protectorate of the British people, and they ruled by proxy. And Botswana discovered their diamonds a year after the British had left. So what they did was to upgrade Gotla to a modern system. So it's not like in the whole of Africa. I think we should move away from generalization when we're talking about Africa. Remember, there are 54 countries, over 2,000 languages and cultures. So let's take into account the nuances, because Africa is really diverse. And people quite often ask, and there are lots of studies around this, why does Botswana have such strong institutions? Because they've always had those institutions anyway, and they were not destroyed, and that is what has propelled them to where they are.
Fantastic point. So Eddie, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, just to the comment that was made moments ago, I think he speaks to this notion of a change in mindset, about looking at homegrown solutions to our own problems, figuring out mechanisms that we can be contributing to the globe by tapping into the wealth of knowledge and wisdom within our communities. Recently I read a headline on the BBC, and it said something to the extent that rise of African migrants at US-Mexico border. That is 13,000 kilometers away from Kinshasa, Luanda, and so on. These young people are finding their way all the way to the Mexican border for opportunity. And we're talking about a regional, free trade area. They can get to wherever they need to get to when the opportunities exist. And there's agency, there's energy, there's creativity in all that they're doing. So I think we need to harness these changes in mindsets that are taking place. We've been talking about STEM and how important STEM is in our education. I think we're missing one element that's got to do with the arts and humanities. Right now, African music and art around the continent and around the world is becoming ubiquitous. The diaspora, the African diaspora beyond the borders of the African continent are beginning to see the connection between their blackness, their origins, and the African continent. President of Ghana recently announced that the year of return for the African diaspora would be 2019. So this whole year, they have a strategy, a government strategy, to attract diaspora Africans to Ghana for tourism, but also for cultural exchange and experience. So there's opportunities in how we conceive our continent from an assets-based perspective. Dina mentioned this yesterday. We constantly seem to focus on the deficits and the weaknesses, but there's tremendous wealth and positivity that we can leverage to change people's mindsets on our continent.
Fantastic. So I think we had, if you've spoken, I'm not gonna, if you've spoken, but you're the MC. Are you asking a question or telling us it's time up? Okay, okay. Okay, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Oh, you're still a, she's still a person.
I'm still a delegate.
Sorry,
Okay,
go on.
I think, I want to bring in the issue of thinking about solutions from an institution-based place. And I want, and he said African Union will not give us a solution. Here is a space, the digital space. And on the issue of governance for me, I think one of the biggest challenges citizens find, and because I have worked with citizens on issues of accountability or corruption or how do we hold people to account, social jail. And this is a concept that I think we need to talk about because it happens a lot that we do not call each other's peers out. So what are the consequences for actions around this? So, politically, ICC and some of those things, we've seen what happens if the laws exist for holding people to account, but who's going to implement it on a scale? We're not talking about Sudan right now.
Yes.
Africa is not talking about Sudan. It's a travesty for me.
It's true.
Who are the people speaking about Sudan? It's happening on the digital platform.
Yes.
So musicians are now saying, a Kenyan musician was in France. She had 15,000 people say enough about Sudan 2 days ago. They had not heard about it because they've shut down the internet and they've shut down journalists are not reporting about it. So there's an entire thread happening that's keeping the world informed. But what are we doing for other things? Change movement in Tanzania by Marie, who was yesterday. That's what it talks about. So I want to be very clear that for a lot of this generation, to your point where you've got 60-year-olds and 17-year-olds, digital access and the conversation around access might be a critical factor in shifting how governance begins to work. Because young people are not going to wait for you to have the institution happening and to be told this is a bureaucracy around it. They're going to start a hashtag, they're going to start a movement, and let's be very concerned that those movements are not confined within your borders.
True.
A client had a crisis in Kenya because they started a topic on quality control of sanitary towels. The heat map showed that conversation was global by the time they were done. The global, it was a multinational company, the global company muted that hashtag globally because it was going to be a global crisis. So digital is going to be a key thing in holding people account. Social jail for those businesses, companies, individuals is going to be a key thing that could change the game.
I love the point that Lorna is bringing up, Musa, is this issue of accountability through social media. And I think when you think about democratization, keeping your leaders accountable, making sure that trust, that currency of trust is upheld, you realize that the next generation, their tool of influence will be social media. What do you think about that from a stability standpoint?
Well, I think it's key. The issue of trust is very important, and you find out that she spoke about the generational gap between those that are led or those that actually go to the polls to elect leaders and the leaders themselves. So you're kind of finding that gap that exists, and you ask the question, who is going to fill that gap? And I think this is where platforms like this should fill in. Because in these platforms we just saw a picture of someone that has been an Eisenhower Fellow 50 years ago, but we have 2019 fellows. And today they are coming together to exchange ideas that in the outspace there or outside there, government is not having with its own citizens. So probably what we should do, or what I think we can do to facilitate this is to get more involved. We talk about leaders, we're leaders, we want to create leaders and so on. But in the real sense, we think that leaders will happen in a vacuum. We do not take practical steps. I know one of my cohorts in Ghana today is standing elections. And in that cohort, we keep, go Alain, go. But then what is the support that is given to that guy? How do we create that critical mass? Or do we want him just one person that will just get sucked into the vortex and it makes no meaning anymore? True. Then that means we're doing the same thing over and over again and we want different results. So if we want to close that gap of trust, if we want to ensure accountability, we have to create a critical mass of people that hitherto felt that I have no business in politics to get involved, and we encourage them to stay there and make that impact that we are all thinking about, that will bring about accountability, that will bring about the issue of trust, and create a culture where government or those in authority feel it normal to be accountable to the people and to the citizenry.
I think you bring up a good point. So all of us in this room should be able to use our voices through social media, bringing it back to Lona's point, to help keep that accountability going. Did you want to? But there was somebody, you also...
Can I make a quick
Sure,
point
please, yeah.
about
yeah,
the social
yeah,
media?
Sure.
I think it's not incorrect, but it is incomplete if all of the advocacy just stays online. Because I think there's a desensitization that seems to be occurring with certain governments. Oh, give them 3 days, they'll stop all this noise and we can go back to business as usual.
That's true. The
So if
cycle
it's
is
not
short,
followed
yeah.
by on-the-ground action as well. So I like that Lorna said it's a tool. You use it and leverage it. I think social media is great for provocation, getting a topic on the agenda. But I think it also needs to be kind of in a system where you're organizing on the ground and you're voting your principles as well. And I think that that's where a lot of young people don't kind of finish the process. So getting on social media and letting your headache be known is a great first start, but it's incomplete. Continue that with on-the-ground advocacy and voting for what you believe and standing for elections as well. I think that, it's encouraging over the past few days that I've been here to see such young government ministers here in Rwanda.
Yeah.
And that's been phenomenal, and I applaud the Rwandan government for just really investing in young leadership. And I hope that other countries will follow suit.
Fantastic. Yes, please. Sorry, I'm coming this way. No. Be patient, be patient. You spoke yesterday, don't worry, we're coming.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you to take a deep breath? Because I'm going to take you on a slightly different way of looking at
Oh, we're going to get
things.
uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Are we getting uncomfortable?
So
hope
you were sitting in this building, and the way we experience life, unfortunately all too often now, is through the ephemeral, through the aesthetic elements, and not through the key, what I would call load-bearing elements. So this building is standing not because of anything you can see. You don't actually see the load-bearing elements of this building. You like being here not because of those load-bearing elements. You like being here, you enjoy being here because of the ephemeral, the aesthetic, the covering, the cladding, and so on and so on. And I think we have conversations all too often which focus on the ephemeral, what we can see, smell, and experience, and we miss the essence of what is actually behind it. I would like to suggest that the reason why our institutions are not working from a governance point of view is precisely because of this reason. We keep being drawn, our attention is being drawn to what we can see, experience, social media, but these are not the load-bearing elements of society. So, if you look at nature around you, and look at engineering, and look at human endeavor, all of it is more successful when we succeed at mimicking nature. The closer we are to mimicking nature, the more successful we are in building human constructs. Good example, aeroplane. All it is an attempt to copy what birds do. And the closer we get, the more efficient an aeroplane becomes. Now, when it comes to human beings, we've led ourselves into this cul-de-sac where we think we are different from the rest of nature. And we keep going down this line, and as a result, we've stopped ourselves learning more explicitly from natural phenomena around us. Now, in nature, how does governance work? How does governance work in nature?
It's a natural order.
Nature other than human beings. And in the world that we emulate, the old civilized world, how does governance work? Why did the Queen, in spite of what I think the rest of us acknowledge as bad behavior by Donald Trump, why did the Queen invite Donald Trump to a state dinner? Why did that happen?
Okay, answer the question then.
No.
Or do you have an answer to the question?
Well, I think I do, but I
Okay.
think all I can say is, I think maybe I'm formulating a hypothesis at best. I don't think I can claim to have an answer. I think that there is pragmatic governance. And I think when you look at history, all of it only happens when there is an alignment between two elements. The people with power and authority and their interests. It's the only time when governance works. And it's also informative, I think, to take note of Animal Farm, George Orwell's book.
Very good book.
And when you then realize that there is no ruler anywhere in the world other than maybe Julius Nyerere, who got into power poor and came out of power poor, doesn't exist. Why? What are the lessons we should be drawing from these things? Why does it happen that your opening statement is what provoked me to go through this journey. You said no big man syndrome anymore. There is no natural phenomenon other than in humans where the ruler is not the most powerful. Doesn't exist. In the modern world, actually the same is there, we just choose not to acknowledge it. And that's why Trump today, in spite of his bad behavior, the whole of Europe still kowtows around Trump because of economic and military power. And we, on the African continent, think we can define another model which looks differently. Where has it ever worked? So I think what I should do is leave it at that and ask us all to contemplate this issue.
It's marinating. The gentleman in the white shirt, and then Teddy.
My name is Olubomi Odekunle from Nigeria.
Okay.
And my own submission is this. The blame game will never stop until we get involved ourselves.
Okay. Are you gonna? Okay. When we're raising points, let's bring in new content. So yeah, please.
All right.
Okay.
The blame game will never stop until we get involved ourselves. It is very easy to throw blames to the government and all sorts. As private, wherever entrepreneurs, wherever we are in our respective field, I think we need to get involved in governance. We see governance as this big thing up there. No. Governance starts from the home. If I ask everybody seated here, how many of us attend the local community meeting in our environment? Take, for instance, in Nigeria, we have a population of almost 200 million. The registered voters, 2019, the last election, was just 85 million.
This is last month.
Exactly. Out of these 85 million registered voters, only like 60% actually came out to vote. So how do you expect Nigeria to move forward? So this actually happened also in different countries. So my own charge for us now is we should get involved, irrespective of whatever we're doing, because these are the same set of people that determines if you and I will have electricity or not. They are the one that they are determining how much you change the currency. They don't matter. It doesn't matter. But the point is, if we don't get involved, things will never change. We will just continue bringing problems, throwing blames here and there. So I advise everybody, especially the youth, to get involved in governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, give him a round of applause. It's important. Somaila, don't forget, did you put your hand up? Yes. Have you remembered what you wanted to say? Okay, can we get a mic to Somaila, please? Oh, Teddy. Sorry. Let's. Okay, Somaila got his mic. Teddy, I promise, it's coming.
So
it's
I
coming.
wanted us
He's
to,
the big man. He's the one who paid for most of this conference. But please. He's our Oga. But please.
So I wanted us to appreciate some of the opportunities that are emanating from the discussions. I didn't want us to lose sight of those. So the fact that most of Africa is not within the formal economy is an opportunity for us. The fact that this continental free trade agreement means different things to different people is also an opportunity for us. The fact that governance is presently not as effective because we have low tax brackets is also an opportunity for us. And digital technology is the solution to all of this.
Yes.
So I want us as Eisenhower Fellows to be the change agents that we are and see these opportunities and see how we can all collectively take advantage of them. I don't think that we should allow this to go because other people will take advantage of it. Yesterday I was in a discussion with Gita around how non-Africans are always the ones that take advantage of the obvious opportunities for us. So I want us to do different. I want us to focus on the opportunities in whatever way, if it's in creating a bigger tax bracket, allowing Nollywood movies to be sold, creating more news access. Let's look at the business side of this and take advantage of it.
Okay.
Thank
That's
you.
a call to action for us as fellows in the room. Thank you. Yeah, let's give him a round of applause. It's a good point. Thank you. Teddy, you have your mic?
Yes, I think
As
that,
we get the mic to this other gentleman here.
as a medic, I have the responsibility to remind us as we think about the future of governance that we're depending on people who will make decisions in 20 years, 30 years. But the current reality is that we have 50% of our children under 5 malnourished. Now, the implications of that is that in 15 years' time, when these children of now are supposed to make decisions, 50% of these decisions are compromised. Because under 5, if you're malnourished, your cognitive outlook when you're 18 is diminished. And I think it's a governance responsibility to continue these conversations that enable us to make sure that our children are better fed, because it has significant implications. Here we are discussing the Open Africa Agreement, we're discussing different things that depend on people to think in 20 years' time, but we have a responsibility to make sure now that they can think. I see a lot of children with big heads that we need to operate on. In the US, it's maybe 0 to 1 per 100,000. In Africa, it's 15 to 30 per 100,000 who have these problems. Now, they've been able to eliminate these problems by simple things like fortifying food with folic acid. Now, these are political decisions that are made. And these are some of the responsibilities that governance in Africa has to deal with. We have to start these conversations. How do we fortify our food with, elements that will make our children now think like human beings in 20 years' time? And I think that those are responsibilities that we have to remember as we think about the future of governance.
Thank you for that. It's a very good point. Did you get your microphone yet? Yes, let's give him a round of applause.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My name is Olujimi Akiode from Nigeria. Now, talking about being involved, I really encourage that people like us present here, we should get involved in governance in our respective countries. But what I want to say is this, going by Nigeria's last elections experience, we have a lot of educated, learned people that got involved. But the mistake they made was this. We have spoken so much about social media and a lot of other things. Now, the mistake they made was this. They wanted to leverage on social media. And a lot of them, they came out, they gave us statistics. I have X number of followership on Facebook, Instagram, and all this social media. But by the time we got to the election, they failed woefully. Now, why am I saying this? It's good for us to get involved, people like us. But we should not make the mistake of thinking that via the social media, we'll be able to succeed in being involved in governance. I was discussing with Bran yesterday, and he told me one thing that happens in Rwanda here. How there is connection between the local community and the presidency. And that gives me a signal that the president is really grounded in this country. In Nigeria, there's something we have some politicians, we refer to them as grassroots politicians. For us to be involved and make impact, we must be such grassrooted politicians. In the sense that many of us, we have some of us, maybe on our street, we just keep to ourselves, we go about our business, we are not even connected to what is happening in our communities. So if we are going to make the needed impact, we must make sure that we go to the root of our respective locations or countries or communities so that we can make the needed impact.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. I'm told that we're out of time, but I don't know, Miata, if you have a very quick point to raise, and then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to just quickly and very crisply say in their mind what's the singular most important governance issue that we need to take out of this conference as an action point. An action point to enhance governance in Africa. Okay, Miata.
Great. So I want to speak from the perspective as someone who has been a victim of conflict. So as we talk about governance, it's important on the continent for us to think about the youth that we anticipate are going to be leaders. In a lot of our countries, there's conflict. And what that does is that it definitely interferes with their potential. So take Liberia as an example. 14 years of my adult life was spent in war. I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate to be one of the persons that despite all of the conflict, I was able to go to school. Despite the conflict, I was able to work. As an adult, I've also worked in other places that I've seen people that were in my situation. I stayed in Sudan for many years, both the Sudan and South Sudan. I stayed in Congo. We look at Somalia. There's so many countries on our continent that is going through conflict. And when we think about who's going to take the leadership afterward, a lot of our youth are placed in a really terrible position. Teddy mentioned from a health perspective nutrition, but just think about all the things that they see. So as they grow up, they basically see violence, right? And so eventually, when things subside in those countries and they are taking leadership role, they come to the leadership position with a very bad mindset. I asked a young Liberian who said to me that he's training to become an engineer. And my question was like, he wants to deal with issues relative to oil because he heard that oil has been discovered in Liberia and where have you. And then I asked him the question, why do you want to do that? Because there aren't a lot of people doing that. He said, because I want to steal. The hardcore reality is that all that we have shown in this country is corruption. And it's something we don't like to talk about. So when young people get into a position, all they do is to steal. I don't blame them. I don't blame them because growing up is what they see. We don't have good examples. We don't have good examples. And if governance is expected to improve on the continent, the youth that we expect to be in leadership role in the future, we have to firstly make them to live productive life, make them to think as good citizens that will eventually become leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause. So I think I'm going to very quickly summarize the insights that I've, sorry, we're out of time. Someone came to tell me, turn off your mics. But anyway, so we need to wrap this up. But I made notes on what I'm hearing from you all about what is good governance. And what keeps coming out very strongly is this issue about political will around democracies, but also to address this issue of governance. There's issue around rule of law, transparency and accountability, engagement, including through social media, and also this point about having a long-term view. So as we wrap up, I'm going to ask the panelists to quickly say, in your mind, what's the singular most important governance issue that we need to take away?
So I will refer to what Dr. Moyo shared with us yesterday, that if you look at a number of constitutions on the continent, they're formally very progressive. And so there's a gap between what we read on paper and what they're delivering. So I think we need to work more towards achieving inclusive and resilient institutions. And we have to make sure that our governments have the ability, and these are not my words, they are Robert Dahl's, of continuously being able to respond to our preferences without establishing differences. Why? Diversity is an issue in Africa. So if we have a government that can, first of all, the government has to understand what our preferences are at any given time, and then to be continuously responsive towards them. And that has to be, of course, coupled with accountability and fundamental human rights and liberties.
Thank you. Eddie?
I think for me, I might mention something Kimball mentioned yesterday, which is the challenge of governing the transition. There's going to be great complexity and nuance to how we manage these transitions to a wider open continent. It needs to be inclusive. We need to have women involved, people in the rural communities, the bottom of the pyramid, making sure that governance respects the dignity and rights of those people for whom their leadership is directed.
And respects the heritage, to the point that was raised earlier, that some of these frameworks have existed for centuries.
Absolutely.
Okay, Yawa?
You know, I genuinely feel sorry for anyone who's in political leadership in Africa. There's just a myriad of problems.
You're supposed to be recruiting people. I mean, hey.
You know, there's a lot. There's a lot on the plate. There's the issues of terrorism, issues of health, issues of even the governing structure. There's the large informal sector. There's how do we raise the money we need to do the work of development itself. I was speaking to a politician in Ghana who was talking about the fact that we have 24 million people in terms of population, but only 2 million people pay taxes. So how do we stretch those few resources to cater to everything that everyone's complaining about? So I do realize that there's a burden that comes with leadership, particularly in a continent like ours. But there is great opportunity. And that opportunity is sitting right here in the room. Diverse, dynamic doers. People who are on the ground, who recognize and who see these problems from a very unique vantage point. So I do think, for me, the one key action point is to mobilize the dynamic doers in this room to chart forth an action plan of change in our various countries. And I do think it needs to be multi-year, and it needs to be deliberate about creating a cadre of people who can think critically, work competently, and really drive change where it's needed most in our governance.
Oh, fantastic. Let's give her a round of applause. I think as Kenya, we've been talking about it as Kenya, about how can we repurpose the Eisenhower Fellows in Kenya to really inform policy, and we're thinking about setting up a think tank. And hopefully one of us is going to run for office, Emma. All right, Musa.
So what I think is important is leadership to work towards establishing a culture in societies or countries that that culture talks about integrity, talks about selflessness, talks about service, talks about inclusiveness, talks about, that culture that, so when leaders invest in that, like we've seen, and we had the president talk yesterday, a simple thing that a leader does and everybody sees that he or she gives priority to that. It takes time to build a culture, but when it is built, you find the whole nation and wider continent galvanized towards making things happen. Right. So building of a culture, it's key and important.
Thank you. Let's give everyone a round of applause. Give yourselves a round of applause. I think it was a very good conversation. And let's just end by saying you are the change we need. Thank you. We're going to take a photo outside. Yeah.
I think we owe this panel a final round of applause. That was exemplary. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nuru. We're almost done. We're going to just be changing things around, and I'm going to be handing you over back to Diana, who's going to close out this ceremony and this whole conference today. But as we do that, would like to just, I know this was mentioned earlier by Mr. Kwabena about the Intra-Africa Trade Fair that's going to be held here next year, and we wanted to show you a quick video as to what that is so that you have something practical to actually go. So if we could please run the video for the Intra-Africa Trade Fair that's going to be happening in Kigali next year.
The African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, in collaboration with the African Union and the government of the Republic of Rwanda, brings you the second edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair, IATF 2020, to be hosted by the government of the Republic of Rwanda in Kigali from the 1st to the 7th of September 2020.
I think that you agree with me that the 2018 Inter-African Trade Fair has been a tremendous success. For us, it surpassed all our expectations in every measure.
It has all been a great success, and that each of you must have had insightful discussions.
IATF 2020 is expected to attract over 1,100 exhibitors and 5,000 conference participants from more than 55 countries and to generate over $40 billion in trade and investment deals. IATF 2020 will provide a unique and valuable platform for businesses to access an integrated African market of over 1.2 billion people with a GDP of over 2.5 trillion, created under the African Continental Free Trade Area.
The first Intra-African Trade Fair is the first deliverable of the African Continental Free Trade Area, even before the agreement has entered into force.
IATF 2020 will consist of an exhibition, a trade and investment forum comprising of the IATF 2020 conference, featuring leading African and international speakers, and a variety of sessions on, among others, African trade and investment, opportunities under the African Continental Free Trade Area, and training workshops covering exporting, standards, and marketing. Business to business and business to government matchmaking and exchanges, allowing buyers and sellers, governments and investors to meet and conclude business and investment deals. Country days for selected countries to showcase their trade, investment, tourism, and cultural opportunities. A virtual trade fair, providing buyers, sellers, exhibitors, and countries an interactive online platform where they can showcase their goods, services, and investment opportunities. Creative Africa, which includes a fashion show, music, film, a Creative Africa Summit, and a dedicated creative industry exhibition. African heads of state, ministers responsible for trade, industry and finance, central bank governors and captains of industry will be participating from the 1st to the 7th of September 2020. Afrexim Bank, the African Union and the government of the Republic of Rwanda invite you to join us in Kigali, Intra-African Trade Fair, Transforming Africa. To register and get more information, visit www.intraafricantradefair.com. Promoted by Afrexim Bank in collaboration with the African Union and the government of Rwanda.
So now you know exactly what's going to be happening, and we hope that you will share and spread the information. Thank you very much for your attention this morning. I know it was a bit of a difficult start. Thank you for allowing us to do this, and on behalf of myself and the team who helped put it together, goodbye. This is the last you'll see of me. Diana, please come and take over this. Thank you, guys.
We need to give Lorna a big, big round of applause. She's been amazing. So I'm going to start with a few announcements before I go into the closing ceremony. And these announcements, there's a first part and a second part that I'll give. So the first thing is that I don't think it's still at 2 p.m., but we'll announce this just to let you know that this afternoon we're going to have a shopping and cultural trip around the city. There's also a visit to the Kigali Genocide Memorial Museum, and this is at no cost to you delegates. All this information will be updated, but I just wanted to, because a lot of people were asking, what are we doing next? What's happening after this? So we've planned some afternoon activities. And then this evening, we have a fantastic night planned for you at Pili Pili Restaurant. And if you're staying here at the Radisson, Serena, Marriott, or Ubumge Hotel, buses will be picking you up at 7 p.m. So if you want to, continue this beautiful energy and hang out in the evening, there'll be buses picking you up at 7 p.m. Val, is there something you want to tell me? Yes, so I've just been apprised of a couple of changes. So we are going to have, at 3 p.m., if you want a cultural tour of the city, please, at 3 p.m. we're going to have lunch, and then at 3 p.m. we'll sign off. And then also, this comprises of the cultural tour and the Genocide Memorial Tour. After lunch, 3 p.m., we'll be departing from here. And then also, like I said, in the evening, a really great night at a restaurant called Pili Pili. Has beautiful views of the whole city, 7 p.m. Buses will be at your hotels if you're at the Serena, Radisson, Marriott, or Ubumge Hotel. And then about tomorrow, a lot of people were asking about Sunday. You really cannot leave Kigali without visiting Akagera Park. So Akagera Park, this is a game park, and there will be transport arranged to leave at 6 a.m. in the morning. So, yeah. So it's like a 2-3 hour drive from here. So 6 a.m. in the morning, and this is a no cost to the delegates as well. But please ensure that you sign up at the information desk right outside after this session, and it departs at 6 a.m. and you will return to Kigali tomorrow on Sunday at 5 p.m. Are people interested in waking up at 5 a.m.? Yes? Yes. So the departure will be at 6 a.m. and then you'll be picked up from your hotels. Yes. Any questions? You return at 5 p.m. Yes. Right outside. Right outside the... Yes, I'll let Val to just make a few announcements as well.
Hello all, I'm Valentine, part of the event management team. So a trip to Rwanda is just not complete without a safari. I mean, you've got to see the lions, the buffaloes, and the organizers are paying for this trip for you. So we think it's just one of those opportunities that you cannot miss. So yes, it's 6 a.m., but you can have a nap in the car as you travel there, but it's worth it. All we need you to do is just sign up as right after this session at the information desk. We really need to know the numbers within the next hour because we're going to commit and pay for it. But really, if you can, do try. And one of the reasons that we need to get there early is because we also get to see some animals that are around at that time. Okay? So outside this room, please sign up. We'd love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. And without further ado, I'm going to call on Yawa, the lovely Yawa, to just give a wrap-up of this beautiful two-day conference where we've convened together and shared amazing insights. Yawa, over to you.
All right, good afternoon. Can you show me by round of applause and screaming how excited you are to have been here? That's a good start, but can you show me by round of applause, screaming, and jumping how excited you have been to be here? I have to say, this conference has been nothing short of remarkable. And can you show this same excitement and enthusiasm to Eisenhower Fellows Rwanda? I think I speak for all Africa Fellows when I say we are in awe of what you have accomplished. We are in awe of the great hospitality. We are in awe of the great program you've put together and the warm welcome. So we're all trying to claim Rwandan citizenship, by the way, so we can figure this out after the program. But thank you. This has been nothing short of remarkable. So if you could take your seats. In addition to Eisenhower Fellows drawn from over 20 countries across the world, we've also had the benefit of taking this 3-day experience with wonderful guest youth delegates from all over the world. And I've invited 3 amazing, dynamic women that I had the opportunity to travel with from Ghana to share their aha moments, their key takeaways, and what they are committing to accomplish as a result of this conference. So if I could have help with a microphone being sent over here, the first woman from Ghana who I'd like to introduce is Amma Duncan. She asked the president yesterday a fantastic question, and she wants to share her key highlights and takeaways from this conference. So Amma Duncan runs the Fabulous Women Network. It's an organization that supports women all over Ghana, and she's soon to be opening a co-working space for women entrepreneurs. So Amma, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Yawa, for this opportunity, and thank you, everyone. This has been amazing. I mean, I knew before we came, there were a lot of hurdles that I had to go through, and as I kept facing one challenge after the other, I knew I had to be here, and that's why the devil was trying to stop me, and thank God I have been able to make it. So I had so many things that I've written down that I need to do when I go back. I really appreciate the opportunity to have finally asked President Kagame that question yesterday. It had been burning on my heart forever, ever since I heard of Rwanda. So I feel at peace now. I know your secret. I'm definitely taking it back with me. And the other thing that's really kept resonating with me, or perhaps was reiterated for me, was one of them was my responsibility. So being here, it's such a huge privilege for me, and I'm very grateful. But it shouldn't impact just me, you know? You've come all the way, you've left the family, you're missing them and all. What are you taking back? What impact are you going to make? And one of the things that kept ringing in my head was partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. My company is the Fabulous Woman Network, and we are focused on entrepreneurial skills development training for women. Yawa's organization is the Leading Ladies Network, and they are into leadership, grooming women to be leaders. And we're already partnering in a lot of different ways. But I thought, you know what, we should do more. So one of the things that I'm taking away with me is, I'm going to be hounding you more because we need to do more for the women in Ghana and globally. And even the people I've met here, so I was privileged to meet Tunde and forgive me, Fukemi, Fulokemi, forgive me. So what can we do? Is it just going to be, oh, hi, we met there, or are we going to actually do something and say, oh, it's because we met at that conference that this came up for me? So for me, it's been action, action, action. I need to go and make things happen. So thank you very much for this
Thank you for sharing, Amma. And we did not arrange for her to plug my organization, I can assure you. I want to now hand over to Henrietta Ajete. Henrietta is also an entrepreneur from Ghana. She is the founder of a branding and graphic design business. So very briefly, Henrietta, your key takeaway from the 3 days you've been here as an outsider to the Eisenhower Network.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Yawa. So I have been very overwhelmed by the rich discussions and conversations we've had here, and I am committed to going back home and being deliberate about knowing and being interested in what is going on in Ghana. As a young person, I was challenged yesterday when President Paul Kagame said that as young people, we should not wait for power to be handed over to us. We should actually challenge ourselves. We should ask for power. We should demand our rights. So I'm not just going to be on social media, tweet and rally around and ask for my right, but I'm going to be interested in decision making. I'm going to be interested in policy making. I'm going to be interested in governance and be particular about what's going on in Ghana and challenge other young women like myself back there that we should be interested in these issues as well. And then my last aha moment was actually yesterday. Teddy, the fellow from Ghana, said something. I had to write this down because it really stuck with me. And he says at dinner yesterday that, what right do I have to limit the dreams I should have? Something like that. And it just really struck me. As a young person, I don't have to limit my dreams. I don't have to limit the things that I think I can do. So from here, I'm going to dream bigger, wider, and do more action. Thank you.
Awesome. And last but not the least, Joyce Autry from Ghana, who I think is sat right over here. Joyce is also an entrepreneur. She has 2 businesses, and she has done a phenomenal job managing these companies in Ghana, and she invests in young entrepreneurs as well. So Joyce, very briefly, your key aha moments and takeaways.
Okay, before I start, can we clap for the organizers? In Ghana, we say, Ayiko, well done. So, my few takeaways. The first is digital skills and the future of work. And it's one thing that really sunk in my heart because I deal in appliances. And I ask myself, what happens tomorrow? And the second thing, those in traditional business, those working in the market, what is our plans for them? If we equip ourselves and leave them behind, how are we going to get food on our table? So the question to our leaders as we leave today is, what are our plans for people working in the market, working in the traditional system? What are the measures put in place for them to benefit from these digital skills most of us are even having for free online? Because people are paying so much for getting their business up there, but how are we also going to help them scale up their business? And secondly is, how are we also going to incorporate this in our educational system? As we build on talent, we build on skills, where lies the hope for our future leaders? Because currently, the youth are getting it. But what about people in the primary school, in the kindergarten? How are we building them up to face the future? Because as we think about the future of work, we also need to think about the future of the office. Because very soon, offices won't exist anymore. So what is our next phase? I leave here with a question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. These inspiring leaders from Ghana, thank you so much. And thank you to the entire Eisenhower community. I know many of you fellows from different countries sponsored the attendees who are youth delegates to this conference. So can we have a round of applause for every chapter that brought along delegates to this conference? I think it's important that we're not just keeping this access to ourselves, but we are spreading it. And I want to close by asking you a question one of my mentors challenged me with 2 years ago. He asked me the question, I was going through a moment, and we all go through moments, right? So I was going through a moment in my career where, I needed to make some decisions. And, he challenged me with this question, and he said, will you be a mover or a shaker? Or will you be the moved and the shaken? And he challenged me so that at every point when I'm kind of not owning my power or not challenging myself or stretching myself the way that I know I can, I ask myself the question he challenged me with. And I think that's a question we should continue to challenge ourselves with. We belong to a powerful network, a network that opens doors. And it opens doors because the fellows open doors. But will we be the moved and the shaken? Or will we be the movers and the shakers? And so, my fellows from Ghana and I created a dance out of it. If you'll indulge me, can we stand up for a moment while I embarrass myself? Can we mutually join in this? And we said that we will move and we will shake. We will move and we will shake. We're going to remind ourselves that we are not the moved and the shaken, but we will move and we will shake. We will move and we will shake. So if you remember nothing at all from these 3 days together, remember that you are called to move and shake Africa right where it belongs. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Yawa. Unfortunately, you also forgot someone else who would love to give a few remarks from your team.
My name is Emetha, and I'm grateful to Yawa for the opportunity. And I'm the founder of Single Parent Support Network. And I remember there was a question to President Kagame, and the way he answered it really touched me. He said, I think somebody asked him how they managed as a country to rise above what had happened. And he said, our country had sunk so low, and the only way to go was up. And that resonated with me because of the families I work with. Most of them women, because we have about 70% of solo parents being women, and it gets to a point in their life when their personal lives become challenging, and it can be difficult to get them to rise above that. So this is one thing that I'm going to use to try and get them up and going, not to give up and push through their personal challenges. And the second thing that really touched me was when somebody asked him how he makes time to, in the past, take his children to school. And he said, my children are my children. They are not my driver's children. I want them to be able to take care of their own families. That is the drivers. He wants the drivers to be able to take care of their own families. They have their own children. And this also resonated with me because of the demography I work with. You find very many fathers who have become irresponsible. And it's something that I've been trying to hammer in our society in Ghana. And it's very dear to my heart because I've had very strong men in my life. I was raised by an amazing dad. I'm a daddy's girl. I had opportunity to also see other men play very wonderful roles, and I see how, because of the positive impact we've had from great dads, how our lives have turned around. So I am also trying to get our society up on its feet to try and address the issue of irresponsible fatherhood, so that when we get our fathers more involved in the lives of the children, then we can have better citizenry. So I'm going to take this actually away. If President Kagame can make time and drive his children to school, then I don't think any father is too busy to make time for their child. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause once again to these young and very inspiring people. I think the key thing about Eisenhower is that, at the central aspect of Eisenhower is to inspire, connect people to actually do. And I think that is what your team, Yawa, just listening to them, are going to do. They're going to move and shake, exactly. With us today, we have in this room one of the oldest Eisenhower Fellows. He is a fellow from 1990. He's from Nigeria, and we thought we would honor him by just saying a few words. I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Ige Adeniyi Oluwo to share with us a few remarks.
This is my lifetime achievement. Well, I won this prestigious award in 1990. I was the least qualified. I had a diploma in banking from the Manchester Business School. And I was competing with 19 graduates and postgraduate candidates. Do you know why I'm saying this? I'm so much elated to be here, to be given this opportunity to talk about the reality of life. The time will come when your star will shine. And this is the time for me. I work for the poor people. But the poor people hated me. I continue to do it. I've reasoned with what all the participants have said. And when I raised up my mind to make an inquiry, the opportunity did not come. Now the opportunity came. I appreciate all of you and what EEF has done in my life. I'm so well respected in my country on microfinance, and I tell you, for being sponsored to EEF, I've never taken a kobo from the federal government since 1990. And the project that I wrote was everybody in the world has a right to an income. I call it a right to an income. An opportunity to open a bank for the poor people. In 1989, when we did the competition, Mrs. Miriam Babangida demanded to see that report written by a diploma in banking, not PhD. That's why I really appreciated what I've forgotten his name was saying, that those who have their PhD then in the 20th century cannot work at this present stage. I'm sorry, I love education. I have 6 daughters, and they're all graduates in engineering field. So I'm not debasing quality of education. What I'm really appealing, that sensitive area, which I wrote a report on, became a bank in Nigeria, and they call it People's Bank. That is the effort of the EEF today. But we're not talking of politics. When it came to the management of the bank, my name was removed. But is my name removed today? There is joy in doing anything you have the right to do and the happiness to do. Please, you have to shake the world. Many people are not aware that the People's Bank project was written by a member of the EEF. So you should be proud of that I did not get to USA for fun or for free. Something tangible came out of it. And we were able to handle not less than 27 million Nigerian ladies. Unfortunately, it was the management. The ladies, the women were paying back. But the management of that bank, unfortunately, was mishandled. And we lost more than 2 or 20 billion. The government was ready to help. Once again, may I think my president here from Nigeria is here. I thank you very much for reminding me, especially Shegun, for insisting that I must be here. I don't know why. And let me take this opportunity again, before I thank anybody, to thank my wife, Mrs. Titi Oluwo. She insisted, said, I know you are old, but you must go there. Before I knew what happened, he had paid for the air ticket, he had paid for the traveler's checks, he had paid for everything. Even while I'm here, he remitted another $1 for me. Yeah. Then I was asking him, why are you so worried? He said, you are going to be within the eminent people in the world. Why are you running away? So, yeah, I thank you people in Kigali. I thank you people in Rwanda. I've traveled extensively from Lagos to Kenya. And I traveled by road from Kenya to the border of Kigali. I wanted to know what is the difference between a Nigerian and a Kenyan. I did not see the difference. We are wearing the same shirt, talking the same language, eating the same food. Why can't we come together? Why am I driving Datsun and Japan from Cairo to South Africa? Can't we sit down and start producing our own vehicles? That's the only area where I feel if I die today, I will report all the head of states to God for punishment. Yes. Do you want me to say more? I just thank you for giving me this life achievement. The Almighty God will bless you. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oluwo. Yeah, I have moderated and hosted and facilitated lots of conferences in my lifetime. And I'm not saying this because I'm biased, but this is easily the best. Really, really, really great, great, great conference. And I would like to ask on the program, Beulah on stage, who is going to say a word of prayer as we convene this moment and go back to our respective countries. Beulah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. First note, there's something I want all of you to note as I'm finishing, and as I ask you to do something beautiful. The first birthday of Eisenhower in State House, that's when this was born. This fellowship was born. His first birthday in White House. Secondly, I participated in the first Women Eisenhower program in 2010. This is the first African regional Eisenhower Fellowship. So how beautiful that grace of their first beginning to declare a new day for Africa and a new dawn for Africa. In Jesus, can we clap for that? And how would I want to declare that? I'll speak a word to Africa. And the first word I'm going to speak is in Isaiah 60, for it's a time for the new dawn of Africa. So, Africa, arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over people. But the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears on you. Nations will come to you, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. This is a new dawn for Africa. Amen. I ask you to arise and hold hands as one Africa, and I'm going to do the prayer. Please make sure you hold hands for one Africa, and we are going to, okay? All right. And because we are saying one Africa, please can I have somebody from West Africa here, East Africa, Central Africa, and North Africa? Quickly, one person, East Africa, yes, come, quickly. West Africa is here, East Africa, quickly. The young people, excellent. North Africa, please, quickly. North Africa, quickly run, Dina. Central Africa, quickly. We are talking, this conference is One Africa, and we are going to unite on this platform. Where are we missing? South Africa, please, quickly. Horn of Africa, yes. Anyone else? Central Africa. All right, I want all of us to join hands. All right, and let's say, God bless Africa. God bless Africa. So I want you guys to lift up your hands and all of us say, God bless Africa. God bless Africa. Our Father who is in heaven, we thank you for creating Africa. We thank you for the good plans you have for Africa. We humbly ask you, may your kingdom come. May your will be done in Africa as it is in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, Beulah. I would like to call on stage Siobhan. Siobhan is part of the Rwanda Eisenhower Fellowships chapter. Yvonne, welcome on stage.
Hi, everyone. Mine is really simple. To say thank you to all of you who have traveled far and wide to join us at this conference. It's indeed a historical event. And I remember in 2016 at one of those, places where like, oh, why don't you do something in Africa? And, we're saying, yeah, we'll probably do it in Rwanda or Kenya, but let's do something in Africa. I can't believe that, obviously the conversation after conversation, we are now here to celebrate this occasion. So I'd like to thank, first of all, the Eisenhower Fellowship. The Eisenhower Fellowship 2016 was the first African fellowship program, and I think without it I wouldn't be here, or the Rwandan chapter was born. So I'd like to say thank you to the Eisenhower Fellowship led by George Dilama. Really, really grateful. I remember the first time I met him, there was a session, I think the second day when you're in the fellowship program, there's that first week, and everybody was speaking about themselves, and he had a one-on-one with people, with each one. And I remember him saying, go there and be authentic. Search within because you've got it. I don't know whether he was saying that to everyone, but I mean, to me, I just felt like, how does this guy know me? Because that is exactly what I needed to hear. And throughout the program, that was, fantastic. So I want to really thank you and the fellowship program for trusting in us, for even when we're talking about, the Eisenhower Fellowship, let's have it in Africa. I mean, only you could have, the Eisenhower Fellowship team could have trusted and said, yeah, let's go for it. So we couldn't have done this without you. We really want to thank you. I'd like to thank His Excellency, the President of Rwanda, for honoring our invitation and joining with us. He quickly got it. He quickly understood the vision. And I don't know whether you guys realize, I think that somebody said, can Eisenhower Fellowship people stand up? And he stood up. Did you notice that? So the first time he did stand up, and I felt he feels it. He feels the spirit. I'm really, really grateful that he honored our invitation. I'd like to thank, obviously, the leadership, not only the leadership of the Eisenhower Fellowship, but Tom, Erin, Colette, who supported in organizing this. I'd like to thank the trustees, Kimball Chan from USA, Solomon Chai, Shahid Mahmoud Chai from China, and Mahmoud from Pakistan. Really grateful. If you think about it, these are really 20-hour flights, sort of, program. But for you to have made the time and joined that, we're really grateful. I'd like to thank all the Eisenhower Fellows that are here, and all of you have traveled far and wide. We have about 100 international guests and about 60 fellows who are coming from about 20 countries. So thank you for making the time. Thank you for joining the conversation. We have fellows from Brazil, Mauro, thank you very much, Australia, France, UK, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Liberia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, USA, Zimbabwe, Egypt, Mauritius, Pakistan, Spain, Zambia. I don't know whether that adds up to 20, but if I've left your country out, we really want to thank all of you for joining us. So I'd like to also thank this. Oh, Egypt, I didn't say Egypt. Okay. Oh my God. So that is a trick with naming things, because you'll always forget one thing or, one or the other. But just to say, we're really humbled for you to have made the time and joined us. Some of you coming to Africa for the very first time, some of you coming to Rwanda for the very first time, and we're here to make you stay comfortable. I know that we are winding up this program, but you're still here for a couple of days. I'd like to, I kid you not, all the Rwandan fellows, if you want to stand up, please. Brian, Richard, Leonard, who are the Rwandan fellows? Colin. Thank you. I'm not asking them to stand up. No, keep standing, honestly. I'm not asking them to stand up so we can thank them. I'm availing their services to you all. Your stay here is our responsibility. Take their number, and if you need anything at all, reach out to any of them. It is their responsibility. And obviously, they'll be very courteous and they'll support you, but if you need anything at all, if you want to know, even if it's not something that is not on the program, and you'd like to know anything about Rwanda, they're also very knowledgeable, so if you want to connect with anyone, they're also very connected. If you say, I want to meet the minister of so-and-so, they can make it happen, these guys. So just connect with any one of them for anything at all that you need. Now you can sit down. I'd like to thank one of them, well, all of them, but I'd like to invite Leonard on stage. Leonard was very instrumental, as all of them, in setting up the program and engaging with the speakers. So I wanted to give him a minute or so to personally thank the speakers that came. Leonard.
Thank you, Siobhan. And as I was thinking about the wrap-up and the takeaways from Yawa, she reminded me that the power of the collective and working together is, at the end of the day, what matters. And so, as we designed this program, as early as 2017, if all of you remember, it was a collective effort, from designing the first program to Skype calls, to Lindy taking Skype calls in her car while driving in Joburg, Maria, who unfortunately had to go back yesterday. So designing this program was so much fun because it really spoke to the power of Africans working together. So it brought us so much joy, and I thought it would be remiss of the organizing team not to thank the brains behind putting together this program, but also the wonderful speakers and moderators. But allow me to first thank our wonderful MCs. Lorna, you are just fantastic. A round of applause for her. Dr. Teddy he rose up to the challenge like he always does, and Diana referred to him last evening as the funny guy, but he's also a very serious neurosurgeon. Dr. Teddy, thank you very much. Diana, thank you. You did a fantastic job. I'll quickly go through the program just to thank all the speakers, because there's a personal story to each and every speaker. So yesterday with the first session, obviously you did the honors with the first panel, but Dr. Kimbo Chen, thank you. You called me all the way from Europe to speak about your session and ask questions about what am I supposed to do, give me the content, so thank you very much. Dr. Nkosana Moyo, your team was fantastic. Thank you very much, and my gratitude to them as well for facilitating your trip here. Geeta, is she still here? Yes. The minute she got the invitation, she quickly got it. And so we thank you as the Rwanda Eisenhower Fellows. Louise from RDB, I know she's not here, but she did a fantastic job yesterday. We want to thank her. And Mr. Samaila Zubairu, my gratitude always. I don't know if Nonfanelo is here. The next session, yes. Your team was fantastic. You also organized a Skype call with me to speak about the session on future of work. Thank you very much. Dr. Alexandra, she's not here, but she was fantastic. She quickly got it and understood and came. Mr. Wellington, thank you very much. Harsha, we started the conversation on Twitter, and his first visit to Africa, first visit to Rwanda. Thank you so much for believing in this EF conference. Dr. Diane, she's not here, but please pass on my regards to her. Maria obviously got the best out of that panel. She was part of the team that designed the content. Minister Paula, Dr. Shahid, thank you so much, you and the Pakistani fellows, for making this happen and for believing in the Africa Fellowship program and this conference. Juan, you and the IE University, we had a number of Skype sessions with his team, Dr. Grace and your team. They were fantastic, so we just want to say thank you. We wanted to make sure that we acknowledge your support in designing this program. Mauro, all the way from Brazil, he quickly understood and wanted to come on this auspicious occasion. Sorry, I forgot Ambassador Fatima. Thank you for coming all the way from New York. We appreciate it. Today, we had a number of people. Mr. Airebi, thank you. Andrew Mold from UNECA, thank you for shaping the contents. Emery, Sandra from COMESA, thank you very much for a brilliant conversation. Everybody wants video footage of your session, so thank you. Lindy, thank you for super moderating this session earlier. The governance panel, Nuru, awesome job. Nuru was instrumental in shaping this program and the Kenyan fellows, so we are grateful to you and everyone. Yawa, thank you as well. Eddie Mandri, all the way from Yale, we are grateful. Thank you very much for making the time. And Musa, for coming in and stepping in. Thank you for your insights. If I've forgotten anyone, like Siobhan mentioned, that when you mention, you forget a few names, we just wanted to say thank you very much. The Rwandan team, led by Florence. Florence, in addition to her daily responsibilities, was also eternally committed to this cause, and I want to thank her, as well as Brian, Richard, and Siobhan, and Diana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leonard. So I'd like to also thank our sponsors. Obviously, this could have not happened without them and their support. First of all, I'd like to thank AFC and team. I think Alice and Lucy are here. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Samaila in his own capacity as an EF fellow and a big supporter of this program, so thank you very much. I'd like to thank Afrexim Bank, the Rwanda Development Board, Rwanda Convention Bureau, Bank of Kigali, Brarirwa, KCIC. Is Edward here? Okay. And UNECA. Really, really grateful for your support. Last but not least is CUBE, and that is the event organizer of this event. I'd like to say something really special about CUBE. Val, are you here? Okay, so she's working somewhere in the corner. When we started doing this program, and I kid you not, she's one of the best event organizers in the country. She's worked on events of 4,000 people with 15 heads of state, so she knows what she's doing. And then we came to her as the best in the country with no money, but with a vision. We said, this is what we want to do. This is the quality we want to present. And she said, okay, let's get started, you know. So thank you for believing in us, and thank you for putting together a wonderful show. We're really grateful. Would like... we hope that we've made friendships, connected further. I know that the fellowship program in 2016 made me get lifelong friends. I met people in the United States, and it changed the way I look at things. I think I've never gotten a chance to say this, but when I came on the program, 2016, I was a company secretary of a bank, the largest bank here, and it was a decent job. I wasn't complaining. And then we went to so many places, but for some reason, I think Shegun were together. We went to Kansas City, and this guy blew me away. The guy was in jeans and, I don't know, t-shirt. He just another guy. And remember a company called Iris? And this guy had developed a technology and had sold it to Alibaba. And for $100 million, I think, I never forget that figure. And his office, I kid you not, in those shared workspace was like from here to here. I kid you not, smaller than my office space at the time. And this guy was just going about his business, $100 million. And literally, you can open your bank account just looking at, Iris. And I just kept thinking, what am I doing? Like, what's my contribution? It kept me thinking, and I really got back extremely uncomfortable and wanted to do contribution. And in 2017, I changed career moves, and I think that I wouldn't have even understood what it is that I'm doing now if it wasn't for the Eisenhower Fellowship. To just know, it just opens your mind to things you don't even, on a daily basis, relate to. So I'd like to thank the fellowship program. I want to thank every one of you for coming. And I have the best opportunity to invite Mr. George Delema to give his remarks. Welcome.
Thank you, Siobhan. I wasn't going to speak again today. I figured you heard enough from me yesterday. But I've been moved and shaken, Yawa, by the majesty of what we've experienced here the last couple of days. I do a lot of going around and talking about Eisenhower Fellowships to people that we seek to have join us as sponsors, join us as partners, and I can speak with great passion about this organization because I have great passion for all of you, for our fellows, really. But I always tell them, don't take it from me. You have to come and see this thing. You have to come and see the magic of this thing. And I think it's pretty clear we've seen the magic of this in the last couple of days here. The depth and breadth of the program, the really candid, honest nature of the discussions, the sheer intellectual firepower that you've assembled in this room has been truly breathtaking. And as a result, I think we've been able to see, especially those of us from a distance, who live removed from the continent, though I have family roots in Africa, we've been able to see the beautiful mosaic of the richness and the diversity of this continent and all its peoples on magnificent display here for the last couple of days. And that doesn't happen by accident. We have a lot of practice at putting together conferences that bring together hundreds of people in this life and in my past lives. And Yusuf mentioned earlier how in the past conferences in Malaga, which brought together 330 people from 49 countries, this was in Spain, a country that had a country chapter of fellows that had a global conference before. They had put one on, working with Europeans who had put on several conferences. I personally went to Malaga 3 times to negotiate and inspect everything and select the sites and do all that work to make sure that we would have a successful conference. I talked yesterday about our conference in Cartagena in February, on the future of education, a global conference to follow up with Malaga. I have been to Cartagena 2 times in the last 3 months, personally, to inspect the sites, do the work, negotiate the contracts, all of that. So I say that by saying that's how we do it at our place, and our Rwandan fellows, to an extent they don't even understand the immense trust we put in them. None of us came here once. And there had never been a conference in Africa before. And that process is a complicated process at long distance, and sometimes things get lost in translation. But it was our immense trust and faith in them, and they have so completely delivered. And as a result, we're all here today. So right now, before we leave, I think it's just fair that I ask all the Rwandan fellows, one by one, as I call your name, to come join me on stage. First, Leonard Mungarulire. Brian Kirungi. Siobhan Biamukama. Richard Gakuba. Diana Mipisi. And our honorary Rwandan, the chair of the Rwandan chapter, Florence Gatomi. Ladies and gentlemen, and Colin Haba, sorry. Colin, where are you? Sorry. There he is. Our newest Rwandan fellow. From the newest chapter in the Eisenhower Fellowships Network, they have been magnificent, and we owe you an eternal debt of gratitude. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's all stand and give them a standing ovation. What they have done here is more than put on a spectacular conference with in a wonderful, beautiful place with great social events. What they have done here is allow me to go back with my heart full of gratitude and pride to tell the Board of Trustees of the Eisenhower Fellowships that the Eisenhower Fellows Network of Africa is strong. Teddy, make no mistake, it is. And one of the most beautiful things I've been really moved by this morning is the homage to our fellow Ige Oluwo from Nigeria after 50 years. Sir, you honor us with your presence. So now, this is the end of this conference, but it's really only the beginning, because I can tell you with every certitude, with every fiber of my being, that the commitment of Eisenhower Fellowships to Africa only deepens today. And now I ask all of you to go out and be part. You are now taking your rightful place in the EF Global family. And now I want to see as many of you as possible join us all in Cartagena. Thank you very much.
Just very quickly, allow me to make the following announcements once again. So the tour to the Kigali Genocide Memorial Museum will take, the buses will leave right outside the hotel at 3:15 p.m. Please note 3:15 p.m. is when the buses will be leaving for the Genocide Memorial. And then, like I said earlier on, 7 p.m., the buses will pick you from your hotel if you're interested in joining us for a beautiful evening at Pili Pili Restaurant. And last of all, tomorrow, for those who are interested in going to Akagera Game Park, the buses will pick you up at 6 a.m. Lastly, Lena just asked me to mention this. I would like to thank Valentine from Jordan and Dina from Egypt, because you were very instrumental in putting this program together. Yes. And without further ado, I hereby close the first Africa Eisenhower Fellowships Conference, and see you all later tonight. Thank you.